All right. Thanks for coming here. It's early morning still in Hong Kong, day one, and we are going to jump into a very, very interesting topic, which is behind the scenes of BitVM architecture. So before I kind of allow the panelists to kind of introduce themselves, I'm Sagun Garg here. I've been in the space for almost like a decade now, and it's super interesting to see how the evolution has come for Bitcoin in terms of BitVM being proposed. But before we begin, I would like to have a show of hands in the audience if any of you would be able to kind of share by show of your hands that you're familiar with BitVM, just the word BitVM, just so that I can have a sense that how does my audience look like today. Okay, awesome. I see 5 hands, 6 hands. Okay, last one as well, 6 hands. So yeah, we have some work to do here, for sure, guys, to kind of bring this topic to the audience first and then probably go a little bit behind the scenes as well. I'll be moderating this panel, and I will allow, you can probably, Janusz, kickstart the introduction from your side.
Hi, everyone. My name's Janusz. I do research on Bitcoin L2s, and some Bitcoin L2s use BitVM. So yeah, I research it sometimes. That's me.
Hi, I'm Liam, the chief scientist at Alpen Labs. I do cryptography research, and lately have been working on BitVM, verifying snarks on Bitcoin, and most recently the garbled circuits called Glock on Bitcoin. It's kind of like BitVM, but the next sort of thing.
Hi, everyone. This is Stefan, the CTO of God Network. Basically, I focus on the layer 2, especially the ZKVMs, and most are the cryptography engineering. Yeah.
Awesome. So we have a bunch of cryptographers here, real researchers, actually pushing the envelope when it comes to more advanced capabilities on Bitcoin, I would say. So maybe we start off and kick off the conversation by first probably introducing the idea of BitVM to Bitcoiners, like why the whole initial concept and introduction of BitVM, and what does it really bring in terms of capabilities? Maybe Janusz, you would like to kind of kick it off?
I'm going to kick it to Liam, actually, because I feel like, kick it to Liam.
Okay.
Okay. So, and people who are familiar with Bitcoin might know that Bitcoin's script is very limited compared to, say, Ethereum smart contracts. So you can't verify arbitrary computation in a single Bitcoin script. So Robin Linus, was to allow you to create essentially larger Bitcoin scripts by linking state between different scripts together using a cryptographic primitive called a Lamport signature. And this isn't verified directly by Bitcoin. It's called an optimistic kind of protocol. So somebody else has to come in if the person running the smart contract is lying. So, we assume they're being honest, and if they're cheating, we can detect it and we can slash them on Bitcoin. So instead of checking the whole script directly, we just allow people to prove if it's been done incorrectly. And then there's several different versions. So there's BitVM 1, which uses a protocol kind of like Arbitrum, if you've heard of that. Then there's BitVM 2, which has a single round and has some desirable properties, but is really only suitable for sort of snark verification or very small programs. And then there's this BitVM 3 Glock thing where we can replace the whole Bitcoin script with a cryptography called a garbled circuit off-chain. So that's how I would describe BitVM and why it's interesting.
You want to take a jab at it, Janusz? Like your idea of...
I think Liam described it pretty well, so nothing really to add there. But I'd say kind of maybe looking at this as what is the application that we use for this, right? I think it's really useful for bridges and being able to run a program off-chain that verifies the state of some other network so we can execute kind of deposits and withdrawals and update the state of the bridge based on kind of the verification of the other network state. So that's kind of, I'd say, the application for it is a lot of the L2s now are thinking about, how do we kind of attest to the state of the L2 to be able to process withdrawals on Bitcoin, and using BitVM as kind of this roundabout way to do that. So you're running kind of like this snark verifier off chain, then you post a proof, and then everyone can kind of verify it. And if they detect that kind of the withdrawals from the bridge are malicious, they can challenge kind of the malicious operator who's trying to like execute a bad withdrawal. So I'd say that's kind of like the application of it that people are mainly using it for right now. So they kind of lump the two together. They cut like the conceptual idea of BitVM. They kind of lump that together with the bridging protocols that are being built with it. So yeah, that's what I would have to add there.
Stephen.
Okay. From my opinion, I think we can consider the Bitcoin script as a basic calculator. It can support like the arithmetic operations, logic operations, even some hash functions, but it's really hard to support like sophisticated computation. Okay, so for BitVM, we can consider it's like a computer. It can run the any complex computation off-chain, and then we can use the Bitcoin script to verify the results and the execution trace. Yeah. So from this point, I think it's basically can allow the developers to build the applications like the layer 2, Bitcoin layer 2, or we can say even the ZKVMs. Okay. So as Leo also mentioned, there are different the different advancements of the BitVM. From BitVM version 1 to 2 to 3. For the BitVM version 1, it's basically like the binary search game. Like Alice or Bob run the computation off-chain, and Alice want to prove that the computation was correct on-chain, and then he need to commit the results. If the Bob agree on the results, okay, everything done. It's the happy path. So if Bob says, okay, I don't agree with the results, so it makes us to like one round of challenge, like challenge or sort and disprove. Okay, so basically for the BitVM version 1, we need to commit, or we need to commit the entire computation trace in the Bitcoin. So it's very, very expensive actually. So for the BitVM 2, actually it changed that. We can run the optimistic path, or if no challenging, okay, everything done. Okay. So for BitVM 3, actually it's optimization of the BitVM 2. It can reduce like 100. It can make the assault and disprove transaction for the BitVM 2 maybe 100 times cheaper. Yeah.
Awesome. So Turing completeness is one of the kind of things that a lot of computer science people kind of pursue. And I think in Bitcoin, it was intentionally not designed to kind of be Turing complete. And I think BitVM is trying to attack that in that sense of trying to become more Turing complete smart contracts on layer 2. How would you kind of see that, Liam? I mean, do you believe BitVM is trying to kind of challenge that architecture or principles of that Satoshi kind of brought in, or is it actually trying to meet the demands of newer applications on another layer, not touching it on layers, base layer?
So I think personally, I prefer to talk about sort of arbitrary length computations rather than Turing complete, because the way I see BitVM is it's a way to verify snarks on Bitcoin. And snarks are a way to prove that you carried out a bounded length computation correctly. I don't think this is contrary to the kind of principles such as we might intuit them of Satoshi, because there's this fundamental asymmetry that snarks give you where the verification is very cheap, but the proving is proportional to the size of the computation. So I think BitVM is a way to sort of verify snarks on Bitcoin. I think snarks are very complementary to Bitcoin and blockchains in general. They add privacy, they add scalability. They're just like a really, really cool thing. And I think that had snark research and Bitcoin been like flipped in terms of time, then snarks probably would have been on Bitcoin. They're just like a very natural thing.
Janusz, your take?
Yeah, so I think like building on that and going back to the bridge point is like what is verifying snarks very like useful for? And it's like when people think about kind of L2s and bridges and like what we're using for snark verification, like I think Bitcoin cannot enforce it cannot validate kind of the state of another system. Like you can't validate the execution and the transactions of another system, even if the data is posted to Bitcoin. So if I do a bunch of transactions on another network and I post a summary of that data to Bitcoin, Bitcoin doesn't know it's like the full nodes aren't able to actually interpret what that data means. They need another system to interpret the data. So Bitcoin is kind of like blissfully unaware of what is going on in all these systems. And the reason when we use the snark is so we can convince some program of the execution of the other network. So we're presenting like an argument saying, this is the current state, this is everyone's balances on the other network. I'm going to convince the bridge, because bridges are like really dumb. So like that's another thing I would kind of, if you break it down really simply, bridges are really dumb. So you have to like handhold them through kind of this is what everything's going on off chain. So it's like you go to the bridge and you say, hey, this is the current state, I'm proving this to you, and I'm giving you enough information for you to be able to verify that and then execute the withdrawals based on that state. So like that's kind of what it's really useful for, is like with snark verification, is like we can have all of these other systems off chain that do a bunch of crazy transactions and different types of transactions that Bitcoin can't do. And we have to convince Bitcoin of all of those transactions so we can be able to do peg-in and peg-outs to be able to make sure that we can use Bitcoin on these other networks. So I think that's what like snark verification is like really useful, I guess, in like the context of Bitcoin. Yeah, so I think just kind of thinking of it, and that's what snark stands for. It stands for like an argument, that you have an argument of something that happened. So yeah.
Interesting. You bring up the idea of arguments. Like for the audience, like for the benefit of the audience, like what would be a good analogy? I think I just mentioned backstage. I don't know if with your permission I can share like the on-chain, off-chain model. Does it look like in the court, out-of-court settlement? Like arguments in a court between two parties? Would you kind of agree or disagree or kind of simplify this for the audience? Like, do you believe that could be a model they could use to kind of kickstart this idea of what to keep on-chain, what to keep off-chain, and then eventually, get into the resource intensiveness in-court settlement or out-court settlement, that kind of an analogy?
Yeah, I'd say like if we want to go at this analogy, the optimistic model, it's like if everybody agrees, it's like out of court, we just agree, we're all good, no worries, we don't have to go to court. BitVM is kind of like you have usually multiple rounds where someone presents something and then you rebut them, depending on which version and whether it's a bridge and how the light client works, etc. It can vary, and then if it's helpful, I don't know, this might be a bit stretching it, but a snark is kind of like a language in which you cannot lie. So like if I give you a snark, it's like as long as it's like garbage in, garbage out, as long as the input is correct, like I cannot lie.
Interesting. Steven, you want to take a jab at this as well?
Yeah. So I think I think the first principle of the BitVM 2's paper is doesn't need any change to the Bitcoin consensus. So basically, it still keeps the Bitcoin simple, robust, and minimalist. For the BitVM 2 itself, actually, it's add the programmability to the Bitcoin. Like Liam and Janusz said, it's allows any off-chain computation to be verified on Bitcoin, maybe by the snark. Yeah. So basically, I think from technical side, it's not putting any additional overhead to Bitcoin itself, but most of the question may come from the holders. Because the BTC price always all-time high. So why should I put the assets into the layer 2? So what can we do there, right? So can we get more benefits or revenue from there? So basically, that's always asked by our, maybe the users or the partners. Yeah.
So, I mean, for developers and entrepreneurs, right, in the audience, this becomes really interesting to kind of see newer opportunities that you can build on L2 with these newer capabilities of BitVM. I'm going to switch a little bit of gears here. So, I would like to kind of understand this whole evolution of BitVM. So, from the first paper that Robin brought about, there is this couple of, I would say, 4 groups of people developing and opinionated about BitVM. So BitVM, BitVM2, BitVMX, and now BitVM3, right? So maybe we start, Liam, with you to kind of understand, like, what's your take on this whole evolution? Why the need for so early evolution? Is this a challenge, or is this just like a natural kind of work that a lot of developers see an opportunity to kind of fill gaps that they've seen in the previous versions of BitVM? How would you kind of
yeah. So, I think that, I guess, shout out to like Sam Parker and Super Testnet and everybody. There was this like Telegram group where people were trying to figure out how to verify snarks on Bitcoin, and that's where Robin kind of germinated the idea for BitVM, what I call BitVM 0, which is the first white paper, and it talks about like NAND gates and stuff. So it's very impractical, but that's that idea I described earlier of like linking scripts together with Lamport signatures optimistically. That's kind of the key insight. And then BitVM 1 is if you take existing optimistic protocols and sort of apply them to like a RISC-V kind of program trace, and then in my opinion, like the only really interesting thing to do with BitVM is to verify a snark. I don't know if that's a hot take, but I don't know. Like, so BitVM 2 is kind of like, if you take that principle, like, can we make it better? And instead of going over multiple rounds, you go over a single round, which allows anybody to challenge, which is nice. And then BitVM 3, I think it's sort of see it getting towards this, like, I'm not sure exactly who to attribute this to, but I know I talked to like Andrew Polster about this years ago, like witness encryption or some of these more like what some people call programmable cryptography, like fancy types of cryptography that don't really exist yet, like what you could do with them on Bitcoin. And I see Glock and BitVM 3 as like kind of approaching that vision of like unifying this like optimistic paradigm that BitVM introduced with the like fancy cryptography stuff, and hopefully it will kickstart this like virtuous cycle of research and development. We can get like something really interesting. So I don't think if this is done yet.
Quick shout out to Super Testnet. BitVM 0 is as invisible as Satoshi. So, yeah, Janusz, what's your take?
I think my kind of open question is like, as I've been looking at this, is trying to also understand like what the trade-offs are. Is like my understanding with like BitVM 3, for example, is that it's like when you create the program, it's like you're predefining like everybody who's participating. So like you're defining the operator set, the watchtowers, everything at the beginning, right? So it's not like this ongoing thing. So I think that's kind of like when I'm trying to figure out as I like look at these new ideas is like what's the trade-off space, right? So like why are we moving kind of from BitVM 2, which is like this permissionless challenging model, moving into something like that? So I guess it's more of like a question I have. If you guys want to take a stab at that.
Yeah. So the justification. Well, okay. I just take a step back. I think of BitVM and Glock as like separate from the bridge.
Okay.
So, like, the garbled circuits game is a separate thing. If you consider it by itself, it's just unambiguously better than BitVM 2 if you can make the garbling costs manageable. Unfortunately, we can't currently make the garbling costs for normal snarks manageable. We can for designated verifier snarks, which is what I described in the Glock paper if people want to check that out. But so designated verifier snarks require a fixed set of operators and watchtowers and challengers. The reason that this is justifiable is because we don't know how to do a bridge with permissionless challenging for what people call the light client. So, like I said, a snark is a language in which you cannot lie. But if I sort of tell you a truth about something that doesn't matter, who cares, right? So there's these public parameters and there's the proof. We can have permissionless challenging for the validity of the proof. We cannot have permissionless challenging for the public parameters. Because of that, you can argue that you don't actually have a permissionless bridge. So, if you don't have a permissionless bridge, and you can get a lot of benefits by making the snark validity challenging also permissioned, then you kind of arrive at Glock.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's also like, there's like huge efficiency gains on doing like the designated verifier model. So it's like if we can, like if we're not running a bridge that like, when you look at the, because in BitVM bridges, there's like, I don't know, 4 or 5 different sets of components, right? And if one of them is permissioned, even if the others are permissionless, you're still falling back to like a permission set for your security model. And it's like one of n, but it's still one of n permissioned people. So it's like, okay, then let's optimize kind of for the costs of having this permission set. I think that's kind of like the thing I've noticed. It's like, we're not like doing this at like a very full scale. Anybody can participate, anybody can challenge, anybody can attest to the validity of something is like honestly just very, very difficult. So yeah, the kind of evolution I've seen is like what Liam's just mentioned is like, let's optimize for kind of what we can do right now and then just kind of build upon that. So I think it's kind of getting more into like kind of the application space again of like how good can we make this today.
So bridges is definitely a great application space where I think this can be used, but what other places do you believe, Stephen, if you would like to kind of share a little bit like other areas where this could be really helpful, BitVM, for some developers and entrepreneurs in the audience who might want to kind of pick this up?
Yeah, basically, I can take the God network as an example. Actually, yeah, God network is a Bitcoin ZK app. It can combine the decentralized sequencer and the type 1 ZKVM. I'm not sure if anyone here familiar with the type 1 ZKVM EVM. That means it's 100% EVM. What does this mean? This means that we can allow the developers to deploy their Solidity application seamless. So it's 100% compatible. You don't have to change any code. You can, we can push, or maybe we can attract the developers from Ethereum to this ecosystem. Yeah, so basically this is one of the I would say typical use case for BitVM. And of course, it's also can be used to build the bridge between the different blockchain ecosystem. Yeah, there are already a lot of similar, application right now. Yeah.
Liam.
Yeah, so I think there's 3 basically. There's Bitcoin rollups, which have this light client problem that I was just describing with the permission challengers, watchtowers, whatever. Then there's like kind of the like Ethereum light client. So if you're verifying proofs about Ethereum consensus, you don't have this same light client problem because you're not doing DA on Bitcoin. If you're doing DA somewhere else, then I think you can simplify the bridge. So I would consider that like slightly different, different trade-offs. And then the third one is like borrow lend, but like peer-to-peer directly on Bitcoin. So like that also has a different set of trade-offs because if the borrower and the lender set up the game themselves, then there's no like trusted parties at all. Like there's no pre-signing because they can both just co-sign everything themselves. And I believe this is like the application Jeremy Rubin had in mind roughly when he also like independently of me and came up with the garbled circuits kind of stuff to replace BitVM. So those are the 3 applications I would say.
Yeah, the time is watching me now, I think, rather than me watching the time. So I think we'll probably quickly go a one-liner prediction for BitVM. Where do you see it going, and what's the year where the inflection point hits when we really see some BitVM stuff actually hitting the market in terms of end applications? So,
I mean, yeah, there's already a couple that are live. I'm trying to like kind of validate kind of how they've set it up. It's really hard to validate kind of BitVM bridges directly just looking at the Bitcoin scripts. A lot of complexity there. My kind of prediction is that I think the rollups and other projects will come to market, and we can kind of use this as potentially like a test run to see how valuable snark verification is on Bitcoin. And I think we need to have a broader discussion about enabling opcodes that enable snark verification directly on Bitcoin, and we can kind of bypass the BitVM stuff. So I view it as kind of like a stepping stone, and that's really useful for privacy and trustless bridges and things of that nature. So.
I think the end of this year, early next year, Alpen will probably have like a deployed garbled circuits thing. And I think that there will be a lot more improvements like on the cryptography research front in the coming months.
Yeah, as Janusz mentioned, basically we need to make everything transparency. If you say you are ZK rollup or you are use the proof, maybe show your proof. If you use the like the GAP socket, maybe you show your source code. I think make everything transparency, like the Bitcoin itself, is very important.
Yeah, this has been a fantastic discussion, guys. And you've been a phenomenal audience. I must say, it's a complex subject and you stuck to your seats. You didn't leave the stage. So thank you so much for listening in and trying to kind of get around this subject. It's a complicated one, but thank you for the panelists.
Thanks, guys.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.